Hello YouTube! I'm going to be reading from A New Concept of the Universe, written by Walter Russell. Future science must completely revolutionize its concept of matter. For ages man has thought of matter as being substance. Posterity must learn to think of matter as motion only. The senses of man have for such long eons told him of the many different substances which compose the universe. Therefore, it will not be easy for him to make this transition. The granite rock, the iron bar, the steel ship, and the many other substances which hurt him by too rough a contract, or burn him with their heat, or refresh him with their cool wetness, or nourish him with the meat of their bodies, or lend their bodies to him for the fashioning of countless things of his desiring, all these many things of seemingly substance of earths and seas have told his senses of his apparently substantial body. They have told him that matter is substance, and that it is real. It is unquestionably exists. Objectively of matter is the most obvious fact of the universe to man's senses. All down the ages the mystics have assumed, or have affirmed, that the universe is but illusion, and that there is no life, intelligence, or substance in matter. Abstract affirmations, however, are not convincing to either scientist or layman whose senses have taught him otherwise. Unfortunate for the world, those who speak abstractly and affirm without being able to explain dynamically have been listened to with ears which could not hear that which had no meaning for them. The time has come, however, to give meaning to the inspired mystics and poets who have been illuminated with their inner knowledge, which they found impossible to put into words for man. The foundation principle of the universe is utterly simple, but the simplest of stories is the hardest to tell. It will not be easy for either the layman or the scientist to make the transition in his thinking from a universe of real and dependable substance to a substanceless thought wave universe of motion, whose sole purpose is the recording of thought imagings. The result of such motion is to create a make-believe universe in which both substance and form are simulated by as many states of motion as there are simulated substances and forms in matter. The scientist has not only divided matter into 92 different kinds of substances, but he has divided those 92 substances into atomic systems made up of many more minute particles of somewhere around 20 primal substances. These he calls electrons, protons, neutrons, antineutrons, antiprotons, photons, gravitons, mesons, kappa mesons, positive mu mesons, negative mu mesons, positive pi mesons, negative pi mesons, neutron pi mesons, tau mesons, positive V particles, negative V particles, neutral V particles, and so on, with an end as yet in sight of the many non-existent substances. They so convincingly act their parts in producing the mirages of substance in this universe that the greatest scientists of this world have not the slightest suspicion that the many different substances of matter are but different states of motion. The reason for this great confusion is because scientific observers stated out with the wrong premise from the very beginning, with an unwarranted belief given to the evidence of their senses. Science, ever since Demetrius, have been searching for an unit of matter which would account for the universe. It never seems to have occurred to any of the great thinkers of the ages that creation could not create itself, just as the picture does not paint itself but must have its source in the painter, or as the poem cannot write itself but must also have its creator, poet. So, likewise, must this master drama of cause and effect have its creator, playwright, who conceived the idea of creation and gave it form? One might as reasonably scrape to the bottom of Leonardo da Vinci's painting, The Last Supper, to find its primal pigment and its first brushstroke, in the hope of finding the idea which the painting manifests and its creator as well. As neither the idea of creation nor the creator of it are in the pigment which painted the universal masterpiece, and, likewise, as the primal pigment and first brushstroke were not the cause of the picture, one might search for countless ages without finding that for which he sought. Having thus started out with the wrong premise regarding matter, and having passed on these wrong premises and assumptions through generations of teaching which have become tradition to their inheritors, it is not strange that the conclusions of science are as invalid as the premises upon which they have been founded. Science is still searching for that premortal life principle in matter as eagerly as it has searched for the premortal substance from which other substances extend. The time has come in man's mental unfoldment which he must recognize that all idea is eternal in the zero equilibrium of the still magnetic light of the universal mind, which is God, and that idea is but manifested in motion of body forms by polarized cycles. These appear from the eternal zero and must disappear into that zero in order that they may reappear in endless cycles. The layman as well as the scientist must think differently and express his thoughts with a greater understanding of natural law. The layman, for example, who says, "John is dead," and thinks of John as being John's body, is not expressing the facts of natural law. John is not John's body. John is not dead, nor can he die. The internal John is an idea of mind. He depolarized body is but one end of a longer cycle than the cycle of his incomings, outgoings, breath. But not one whit difference. His breathing will repolarize in another second, but his depolarized body will take a longer period, just as the depolarized oak will repolarize again from its zero in its seed. The scientist must also think in terms of polarity and use terms which have the connotation in them. I will give an example of my meaning by quoting a paragraph from the Scientific American, January 1952. Even more confusing is the fact that all the mesons, pi and mu, undergo spontaneous disintegration. Why not say that they have become depolarized, or that they have obtained their equilibrium, or that they have attained zero? The simple fact is that the motion which gave them seemingly being has ceased. There is no such effect in nature as spontaneous disintegration. I will quote the rest of the same paragraph to call attention to the needless complexity of descriptive terminology which belief in substance seems to make necessary. It is as follows. When left alone in free space, a positive or negative pi meson decays into a positive or negative mu meson, and a neutrino within about 250 millionths of a second. Then the positive or negative mu meson decays into a positive or negative electron plus 2 neutrinos within about 2 millionths of a second. The neutral pi meson also is unstable and decays into 2 gamma rays in a very short time indeed, about 100th millionth of a second. The above is a very complex and confusing way of saying that matter has disappeared by depolarization because motion has ceased. God's universe consists solely of vibrating waves of two-way interchanging motion. Every effect in nature is included in that simplicity. Any child will fully comprehend you when you tell him that sound is an effect caused by rapid vibrations. You can demonstrate it by plucking a harp string so that he can see that sound is caused by rapid motion. Yet, you do not even need to tell him that sound ceases when the motion ceases. His common sense will tell him that. If, however, you tell him the wire is composed of positive protons which decay into negative electrons in 100 millionth of a second to produce sound, then the negative electrons decay into silence in another 100th million of a second, he will look at you blankly and understand not one word of it. All of these many named particles, which science thinks of as differently charged substances, are all basically the same spiral unit of motion. These are constantly being transformed from one condition to another as each divided pairs obey the polarizing charge of gravity until it has completed the outward half of its journey to its reversal point of rest. It then returns as each one depolarizes and withdraws within its fulcrum zero of rest. Exactly the same thing is true of all the elements. Science has given them 92 names and listed their many attributes, such as metals, metalloids, and non-metals, alkaloids, acids, brittle, pliable, conductive, non-conductive, dense, liquid, soft, gaseous, and many other attributes. To anyone, whether scientist or layman, a piece of iron, a piece of aluminum, and a lump of gold are three different metals which have always been and always will just what they unquestionably are, three utterly different substances. Any other interpretation of them would be unthinkable. That is the kind of thinking, however, which must be relegated to past ages. Mankind must henceforth learn to look upon matter as a transient motion picture record of the idea which it simulates. For that is what it really is, a cosmic cinema thrown upon the majestic screen of space.